The government is unveiling an ambitious plan to decarbonise Britain. But many are sceptical whether it'll actually lower our energy bills.
Yes, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, Speak of the Devil, wants to increase the use of onshore wind power to get the country off the apparent rollercoaster of fossil fuels.
But concerns have grown across rural communities in Britain who say that the government has not consulted them about the construction of these stations.
OK, shall we speak to the co-founder of the Climate Majority Project, Rupert Reid. Rupert, are you convinced that Ed Miliband is the man to lower our energy bills?
Well, the first thing to say about onshore wind is that it has been crazy that the last government banned it for so many years, because it is now the cheapest way by far of generating electricity in this country, much cheaper than nuclear or gas. But I do share some of the concerns that you're mentioning here. It would be much easier for this government to win support for its policies on bringing in a lot more wind and solar if it were clear to local communities that they will actually benefit from the wind and solar that's being installed in their areas. Now, in other countries, this is much more common than it is in this country. So I think the government is missing an open goal here. They're making a mistake by not giving, for example, local communities where there are wind turbines installed preferential access to that energy and preferential rates on the energy that gets generated.
I mean, Rupert, you say that wind power is much cheaper than gas and fossil fuels.
Yeah, miles
but
cheaper.
It's not very efficient always, and it's also not always on. Ed Miliband has struggled to tell the country what happens when the wind isn't blowing.
Yeah, so what you need is a mixed basket of renewables. You need to have wind and solar and also tidal and other forms of energy that come from genuinely renewable sources. And what you need is a lot more storage. Battery technology, of course, is improving rapidly. There's also huge potential in this country in gravity storage, which basically means, for example, pumping up water uphill when the wind is blowing and letting the water come back downhill again when the wind stops blowing. So yeah, it's not straightforward, but it can be done. But it needs to be done in a way that works for local people. And that's why I think the government really ought to be alongside these announcements about more wind, which are very welcome, explaining to people how they are going to benefit locally from this renewable energy getting installed. And at the moment, I'm afraid they just don't have the policies for that.
And Rupert, it's not just about the cash and selling it to local people, it's also about planning and building, because there's announcements coming as part of this renewables blitz from Ed Miliband that they will just delete concerns and designate these developments as critical national infrastructure. Do you think that adds to concerns that local residents will have about this ongoing renewables plan?
I think it does. And I think, again, that's why it is crucial that we get buy-in from local people, because otherwise, frankly, they're not going to be able to meet their targets. So what I would say to the government loud and clear is, if you actually want this policy to work, you're going to have to do, for example, what they do in Germany and various other countries, make it much more easy for there to be community renewable energy schemes installed, or directly have people who are benefiting from these schemes where their schemes are installed locally, i.e., like I say, reducing energy prices for those people who are having wind turbines built near them. If people were told, look, your energy bills are going to go down if you allow these wind turbines to go ahead, then I think people would say yes.
Yeah, Rupert, are wind turbines as green as people say? I mean, presumably to build these massive wind turbines, they're saying some of these new generation ones might be 800 feet tall, the majority are 200 feet tall. They must take a huge amount of energy to build them, to construct them, also the materials. And they're like, are they really that green?
Well, you're quite right. We can't just replace all the energy we might want in the whole world and endless amounts of new energy for AI with renewable energy. We're going to have to, in the future, have less energy, ultimately, than we use at present. And what that actually means is we're going to have to get much better at energy efficiency, reducing energy waste. For example, right now, a third of buildings in this country have no loft insulation. We're heating the sky. Everyone knows that's completely crazy, right? So again, I would say to the government, you're missing a huge opportunity by not rolling out a huge program of insulation for our buildings in this country.
Rupert,
if we insulated our buildings in this country properly, then we wouldn't need so much energy in the first place.
Yes, I don't think there's anyone in the country who wouldn't say that it's a good thing to insulate properties, not least because
why aren't they doing it? That's my question.
Bills would be, well, I think we're not doing it because it's extremely difficult in some of the older properties.
No, it's not that difficult.
In some of the older properties, it is. I mean, I've spoken to experts on insulation, and some of the older properties, it is very difficult. Also, they're expensive and also quite intrusive to sort of go around the country, go into everyone's properties and, I don't know, rip out their boiler and also insulate their ceilings and everything.
Hard, honestly. I've had it done. It's not that hard.
Well, how much did it cost you? How much did it cost you, Rupert?
It cost me just a few £100. It's really not that much. What we ought to have is a government programme, for example, to roll it out for free in council houses, to roll it out for free in affordable housing, so-called.
It's not going to be free, though, is it? It's the taxpayer who will have to pick up the bill. That's the issue.
We'll save money hand over fist.
Because we've been promised.
We'll save money hand over fist because we won't have to be wasting money by heating the sky. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I get that, Rupert. But we've been promised for years now that we're going to have this net zero transition and that our bills are going to get cheaper, that we're going to have a positive impact on climate change and the like. We haven't really seen any of that. And in the meantime, other developing countries around the world are kicking on, still using coal, still using fossil fuels at great rates. Also, all our manufacturing has pretty much gone to countries where energy is far cheaper, where they are still using fossil fuels. And I just wonder, when are we going to get these great gains for British people?
Well, look, the reason why we haven't had these gains yet is we've had, for the last decade, a government which has been pushing completely in the wrong direction on this. Now, this government is finally planning to actually do something about it. What I'm saying to you is they're not going to succeed unless they get local people on board, and they're not going to succeed unless they have a huge program of insulation and of reduction of energy waste and of reduction of energy inefficiency. All these things are possible. Other countries are doing them. What we also need, and this is absolutely critical, is a general program of adaptation, climate adaptation. We would be getting people much better on side in this country into climate action if we made clear to them how what we are doing is helping them to deal with climate impacts. So I would say to Ed Miliband, it's all very well and it's good to go for decarbonisation in the way that he is doing. But I want to see way more resourcing going to help people who are dealing with flooding, to help people who are dealing with the growing risk of wildfires.
Okay,
if we had that
Rupert.
kind of serious support for climate adaptation, then again, I think the population would get on side much better.
OK, Rupert, getting the population on side, that's what you want the government to do. But with these solar farms that they're developing, they need to be obviously in the sunny parts of the country. That's generally the south and the east. That's going to be a hyper concentration. We've already seen protests, farmers in Cornwall blockading council offices due to some of these proposals. Is it really the right way to go about it, just to say, oh, we might give you an extra few £100 if you permit these processes to go ahead? It seems like the opposition to this is really quite strong. Could it, in your mind, generate some more of that sort of protest? Could we have more eco-disruption caused by these plans?
Look, what needs to happen with solar farms, again, is that they need to be brought in a way that works for everybody. So if people actually did have a reduction on their bills, their own bills, where they live, if they had solar farms installed near where they live, I bet a lot of people say, all right, then, I'll take that. I'm happy with that. But it's got to be done in a way that gets local agreement, like you say. So that means they shouldn't ride roughshod over local planning rules. They should involve local people in deliberation. And, solar farms can be done well. They can be done, for example, in a way that is integrated with agriculture. There are plenty of solar farms around Europe where you've got, for example, sheep happily grazing amidst the solar panels. And in the future, we know that there are going to be unprecedented heat waves, unfortunately. You can actually have what they're calling agrovoltaic farming. What that means is you have farming going on under solar panels. You have growing of crops under solar panels, because incredible though it may sound, some crops now are being harmed by getting too much sun and too much heat in our hot summers like we had 2 years ago. There are actually plenty of win-win-wins here if we look for them, but I'm afraid that the government...
as long as we have that base load, I'm all for solar panels and wind turbines where they're suitable, but as long as we have that base load and those bills are affordable for people. Rupert, I also am glad to hear you talking about adaptation, because a lot of times people sort of pretend that we can just turn the temperature down, just turn off climate change, when actually it would be better off actually helping people deal with warmer temperatures or different temperatures. Anyway, Rupert Reed, thank you very much indeed from the Climate Majority Project.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, Rupert.